Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angelo Yee, Charlamagne the guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
That's right.
I know he's back. He was here, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
We had a brother, Mysonne. Welcome, Mysonne.
What's happening, King? How
we said
you?
we were going to bring you back, too.
You did say that.
Yes, we did.
Because we wanted to talk about all the violence that was happening, in our communities and, in the industry. And sadly, it's only gotten worse since then with the passing of PNB Rock.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I brought today my brothers, the official gun czar of New York, brother A.T. Mitchell.
What's up?
He's been appointed by the mayor to pretty much focus on gun violence in New York City. So he's the top man in that regard. And this is also co-founder of Until Freedom, my brother Angelo Pinto, attorney Angelo Pinto. So,
Okay. So where do we start? I guess, well, the first reason why we wanted to bring you up, because everybody was talking about lyrics, right? And rappers were talking about lyrics and DAs using their lyrics against them in court. So I wanted to talk about that first. So what are your thoughts on that? Especially, you're from Harlem, you're
from the Bronx.
From the Bronx, man.
My bad.
Jesus Christ.
Don't start no trouble.
My bad. From the Bronx. Of course, you're a rapper. You were signed with Violator, signed so many times. You had records and you got arrested. But what are your thoughts on them using lyrics against you? Or any rapper,
I mean, we know that it happens, right? And if you're engaged in a certain lifestyle, you're in the streets, you actively committing crimes, and then you talking about them, then you telling on yourself. I mean, that's just common sense. I think anybody.
People don't see it like that, though.
But I'm saying, see, the difference is if you're just an entertainer and you're a rapper and you're rapping about what you've seen, and a lot of these rappers ain't living their life and they just making stuff up. So those situations don't fit into what we're talking about here. We're talking about when you're actively involved in the streets, you're actively involved in crime. There are videos with you doing things, you running around with people where they have enough to put your lyrics to say, hey, look, this is him right here doing this, and this is him saying he did that, right? If you just rapping about something that you did, there's no trail, there's nothing for them to follow. So they can't just use your lyrics as evidence in chief.
Yeah, right. It's not like they're listening to rappers and saying, oh, he's rapping about killing somebody, let's go lock him up. That's just another piece of evidence that they're collecting.
Evidence in chief. That's the key to it is not, it can't be evidence in chief. If it supports what they already know and they have people to corroborate and all those things, then you got to be smarter than that.
But let me ask you a question now. Now, how would the DA know the difference, right? Now, I'm listening to some of the stuff that's going on with Young Thug's case, right? Now, the attorney was like, yeah, he said, F the judge, Your Honor, like he was talking to the judge. Of course, he wasn't talking about that judge, but that attorney made it seem like that. That case is something different. But then I think Charlamagne...
But that's not a crime.
That's not a crime.
You understand what I'm saying? So what that does is, what I'm trying to say is everything that you say out your mouth is going to be held against you. If I say, yo, if my wife get out of line, I'm going to smack her in the mouth. And then
you smack your wife in the mouth.
She goes and says domestic violence, and then they pull it up. You made a conscious. These are things that you already said that you're willing to do. So you're allowing them to use things against you that come out your own mouth. We have to be a lot more mindful in the days like I got locked up for crimes, and they try to utilize stuff in my trial too. So I'm aware of these things, and I think as artists for 20 plus years, watching artists have these lyrics used against them all the time, especially when they're committing the acts and they're able to show the mind state that you're willing to do certain things. If you're not making conscious decision as, you know what, some shit I'm just not going to talk about. You know what I'm saying? I understand. It's certain things. I've engaged in certain things. I know people engage in certain things. I'm around certain things, and I understand that what I say can and will be used against me in the court of law, like they say all the time.
And also, these guys are being very specific. Like they're naming actual names, actual crimes, actual locations, dates. So it's like, what do you expect? I want to hear from the attorney.
I mean, I think, to Mice's point, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, and you know the hip-hop police have existed for a long time. So in any scenario, people build cases. So they're probably following you for an extended period of time, and it seems like this is a pattern that departments are now practicing. So artists should say, hold on, wait, let me protect myself. We were talking about it earlier, even in the context of the violence, right? Whether or not you think violence in lyrics actually leads to violence in the streets, one of the biggest targets are rappers of the violence we see in our communities. So at some point as an artist, you would think you would want to protect yourself, right, from the violence that could potentially happen because people are listening to your lyrics. So to Mice's point, it's like at some point, protect yourself.
Yeah,
don't say this in lyrics, and don't have this particular content that could potentially create an atmosphere in your environment that you fall victim to. Why would you continue to do that? Because in essence, you're acting against your own best interest.
Let's stay here for a minute.
Because that's one question. So what are your thoughts on people trying to ban that and to stop, the government from using their lyrics? Because, like Mike said, some people are telling on themselves. So what are your thoughts on them actually doing it?
You mean like the legislation that they're trying to pass that says you can no longer use these lyrics against folks? I'm not going to lie, I'm torn in that scenario, right? I think that, to Mice's point, if you're telling on yourself, right, unless you use a disclaimer and say, everything I'm saying here is entertainment, there's nothing here I'm saying that is real, then there, in a lot of cases, even like if you have a gun on you, there's a doctrine where they say if it's in plain sight, right? I don't have the ability to search your vehicle except when a gun is in plain sight or something illegal is in plain sight. Then I have the ability to search your car. So if you're not just plain sight, your language is saying that you're doing something, then I have to say maybe they should be able to use it. And then my other thought...
Not even doing did.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the question is, why would you not want them to use this if somebody's saying this?
I think for me,
you know what I'm saying? It's strange.
What it comes on for me is I come from the streets. Like if you a street dude, we knew you don't put stuff on record.
That's a fact.
We knew we're not talking about crime. We didn't even want to do interviews. Most street dudes that we knew, you very seldomly seen them on camera. They didn't talk a lot because they still to this day, the OGs that ain't even in the street no more. They be like, I ain't trying to do no interview. I don't want to talk about none of that.
Right.
Like I don't like they don't live that life. So I don't know what made this era think that you could commit crime in plain sight and be free. And I've been saying that. I don't understand what is the mind state. Like when we talk about the PNB Rock situation, right? It has to be levels of mental health, right? To say that you're gonna walk in broad day and just in the middle of nowhere shoot and kill somebody for a chain, you can't even be thinking because what are you gonna do with that chain? How far are you gonna get with that chain?
Right.
After you, everywhere we live in police states now. Everybody got a camera. Everybody got a phone. It's cameras all over. They can pretty much track you everywhere you go. I tell people this every day. I'm like, yo, you don't realize that every crime is on camera somewhere. Somebody got a phone camera. There's cameras connected to the store. They can literally trail you to where you go. So the mind state that you took a chain. What is you think you pretty much gave up your whole life for a chain?
But the thing that you're saying, Mice, the idea that we know, anyone who knows if you're doing crime, you don't say you're doing crime. People, that's a basic rule. So then the question becomes, why would people actively compromise themselves like that? And from my perspective, it's because someone else is making you do that.
Right.
There's something else that's making you do something. You're going against a basic rule, and that don't make sense.
I think Mike said something earlier, and it's something that I've been saying. So many people was fronting for so long, especially in rap music, and being rewarded for it. So if you're pretending to be the biggest super thug criminal in the world on these records, if I'm a dude that's really doing it in the street, I'm gonna be like, well, I want to get paid too because I'm really living this life. So I think that's where people started. That's when it started. The line started getting blurred between the streets and rap music.
But even in that, you still got to work smarter and not harder, right? And I think that goes back to the personal responsibility of the individual and his or her camp. I don't usually look at the artists because they're artists like that. But I do blame the people who they surround themselves with. Somebody has to be in the camp smart enough to be able or bold enough to say that we're not doing this.
But a lot of these,
you're not saying that.
The problem is a lot of these artists surround themselves by yes men. Right. They get rid of the people who say, yo, we shouldn't be doing that. Yo, that doesn't make sense because everybody is perpetuating and making you feel like you the man because they need something from you. That one or two people, a lot of them have to get rid of them and come back because they have to make mistakes. Like you watch these, when we all came into the game, all of us came into the game with posses. It was 100 of us.
Yes, sir.
Everybody had 100 dudes. I was walking the club with 100 dudes, and it would be a dude that barely even knew me would get us into a fight and get me banned from a club. But then I started realizing, like, what?
This don't make
why
sense.
am I bringing all these people? I got to pay for y'all. I got to be responsible for you. I got to do this. And then when it all goes wrong, it's on me. And those circles start to get smaller and smaller. And then you go back to the original people who try to tell you you didn't need those people from the beginning. So it's a real process. And I think it's harder now because the violence is way more incentivized. Like if you look at the artists that are being signed right now, every one of them has real beef. The songs they talk about is real beef. It's real things that people know is going on in the streets. So they're being rewarded for having real beef. So when they getting killed or they getting locked up, like, damn, that's messed up. No, it's not that messed up. Y'all signed him because you know he had beef, and then you made the song that he had beef with platinum. So the dudes he shot or robbed didn't forget about it. You made them more angry because now they like, we gonna get the drop on you. So now the beef elevates to another level, or they got to do something to protect themselves, so they locked up or they dying. And this is a cycle that we continue in.
But the labels are using it too, because you could say this is not the type of sound we're going to go after, because not only does it elevate the sound, it elevates the beef. So if you make a strategic decision that that's what you're going to do, you realize that that's profitable, and that's how you're choosing to make your money.
The sad thing is, you know, at the end of the day, is the record label and the record industry is a business, right?
For sure.
So look at these kids that come from places where they don't have much and they have beef, and they're going back and forth, and they're looking at these streaming numbers going up, and a label looking at it as, okay, well, I'm gonna make money off of this, and they put more money into it, and you know, hopefully, you know, they hope that this artist goes for 10 years, but a lot of times they don't, because like what Mysonne says, this record that you just talked about shooting me or killing me or robbing me just sold 1 million records.
But like you said, businesses protect their investment. So even if I know I'm going to sign an artist who has a likelihood of dying because they got beef, now, and even you see other corporations do it, I'm going to take an insurance policy out on you. So even in the event of your demise, which is probably going to happen, I'm going to protect my asset on the back end.
Now, is that real? Because I've been seeing that floating around, but then it's just like they was like, that's not true. Because even they keep saying that about Empire, but Empire is not even a label; it's a distribution.
Right. No, that's true. I mean, I was signed to Epic Records, and when I got signed to Epic Records, they wanted me to sign, get a life insurance policy on me. The artist actually has to sign off on it, though. I didn't sign off on it, but absolutely positively, they give you a big upfront money. And they want to make sure that they can make their money back. If something happens to you, they don't get that money back. So they look at it like, if something happens, we'll get a life insurance policy to get our money back if you
But you don't have to sign it.
No, I didn't sign it.
But I've seen it with corporations like Walmart. There's a little documentary that talks about like Walmart taking out small policies on their workers who are not necessarily worth as much as a hip-hop artist would be worth, and still making good on their investment in the event that someone dies. So these corporations are doing that, right?
How much responsibility do we put on the industry and rappers for creating this culture?
I think, brother. No, I mean, on the industry, and I think they have a if not equivalent amount of responsibility, because we just talked about who benefits, right? And so at the end of the day, they walk with all the bags, while at the same time, back in the in the neighborhoods, we have to deal with a lot of this trauma, and that's where you don't get all of this stuff lands right back in our lap. And at the end of the day, the industry walks with the bag. And so, yes, they should have some responsibility, if not equal responsibility.
You know, I was going to ask you a question. A.T. Mitchell?
Yes, sir.
I have a huge problem with New York's gun laws, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm explaining to you why, right? So I'm a licensed owner, right? I can carry my gun in, I think, 35, 37 states legally, carried on my hip, not a problem. New York, I have a problem. My son will probably tell you the same, because we kind of came up in the same time. Most of the times when people carry weapons, it's not to do something aggressive, it's defending.
Yes, sir.
Right? So if I'm walking around New York City and I walk out this building and somebody tries to rob me, I can't defend myself.
Right.
You know what I mean? And people say, well, you get security. Okay, yeah, that sounds good, but a lot of people can't afford 24 hours, 7 days a week of security.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's a problem, because if I get caught with my gun trying to defending myself, not aggressive, not robbery, not shooting, not doing nothing stupid, just trying to defend myself like I do when I'm in Georgia or Florida or Texas or any of those other places, I go to jail for 3 years. That's crazy to me. That doesn't sit well with me for trying to defend myself. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, I do understand what you're saying, man, as a licensed gun owner. But, and I know that there's a lot of people who are walking around here with unlicensed.
And
that's why we need guns for them.
That's why we need guns, because they don't
So at the end of the day, and hopefully we won't have to experience an OK Corral type situation where there's two people out there literally, banging in the middle of Times Square or downtown Manhattan or whatever, because, again, you're dealing with people that are legally licensed versus people that are not. Yeah. And a lot of it has to do with training. You got people that don't know how to shoot, which is part of why we actually got Boycott Black Murder, because we see this stuff, again, it winds up back in the neighborhood's lap, where people are dying, innocent people are dying from senseless gun violence every day. So it is it's almost like it's unfortunate for those of you who are responsible. But I think when you look at a city as crowded as New York City, it can happen anywhere. You have a lot more casualties.
Because criminals are smart. They know 9 times out of 10, if somebody's walking down the street, they especially in New York, you ain't got a legal gun.
Right.
Unless you're a police officer, correction officer,
Yes, sir.
or was able to get it. Now people are starting to get it, but very few. So they know 9 times out of 10 they got the drop on you.
Right.
And it just always bothered me with New York City with that.
Yeah, man, this is the biggest city out of all cities, and so at the end of the day, man, we want to make sure that everybody's safe. We want to make sure that those of you who have the right and the privilege of being able to arm yourselves versus those people who, the majority of us who are not, we want to make sure everybody's safe, and that's the work that we do. So we just really just trying to keep this work going, these messages, these campaigns, they have to be, again, back to hip hop and the industry, everybody has to be involved.
And how are they keeping the guns off the street? What's the process to try to make sure they get more guns off the street?
I don't think they are.
No, I mean that's another good question. I mean, for like Charlamagne's point, the illegal guns, the access to weaponry in the neighborhoods right now is crazy.
Do you see the guns they pulling off these streets?
Yo, bro, we talking about literally
But the question
brand
is,
new
why
too,
are they
spanking
even
brand
being
new.
sold? Why do you have the ability to get assault rifles? And that's my issue, my challenge around the guns, because I understand the importance of defending yourself, and I think that is important, and it's a right that people have, right? Second Amendment. But the issue becomes when there's so many guns in circulation. Like, I know, when I was coming up, if a couple of people had a gun, it was like, damn, who had the guns in the neighborhood.
Right.
And you knew if something would happen, this might happen. But I remember, not too distant past, it's like every kid got a gun or has the ability to get a gun. And it's like there's way too many guns in circulation. And the NRA and the folks who produce guns are advocating for more guns to be in communities. And I just don't, and the proof is in the pudding. It doesn't make us safer. It hasn't made society safer. So I think we have to take a different approach to responding to how we keep ourselves safe and what we do, because now every man, woman, child in America has access to a gun.
And before, like you said, it was a 38 special. Was a beat up revolver. It was a gun that looked dirty and dusty. Now, to your point, what you said earlier, I mean, they have
military grade equipment.
They got colorful guns.
Ghost guns. They got all kinds of
barrels, extended clips.
Crazy.
Like the police can't beat them.
That's a fact.
I think what has to happen though, it has to be a culture shift, right? Because the culture of violence is so prominent right now that just defense and you having a gun for defense is immediately puts you in more and more danger, right? If you got a gun, a lot of people who are not trained in de-escalation and they just a regular citizen, it's regular citizens every day that were ready to kill you for stepping on their foot. That's correct. You can't give those type of people guns.
Right.
Like I watched in the restaurant where the lady shot the lady because she was arguing with her, pulled the gun out and shot her and said, yeah, you thought you was bad. A regular fist fight turned into, and she probably was a licensed carrier and shot the lady dead. Yeah. And it's like, everybody can't have guns. There has to be psychotherapy things that we do. There has to be a strenuous process that you go to make sure that you're walking around these streets. And because if you just scared, a lot of people shoot you because you're scared. Yeah. If I'm walking, imagine a racist person, I'm walking behind him, he see me and go, oh, boom, boom, and shoot and
kill
it
me. Happens.
And it happens all the time. So it has to, the culture has to shift.
American culture too. I don't like when they try to say hip hop and black. This is American culture. This is the wild, wild west.
That's
You know what I mean?
That's a fact.
But what I will say about hip hop culture, right? And this is what I want to do, because I don't want to put it on the music. Like, music is a result of the reality, not the opposite. The reality is not a result of music. These kids are talking about what they're actually going through, because that's what I did. I would be hypocritical to act like I don't understand. And I came in here, Mysonne lefty, gun in the right palm, popping niggas in they sleep so they die calm. So this is what I knew at 18 years old. This was our reality. But I do have to say, at what point, right? Once that reality shifts and you become a young millionaire, right? What are you doing? Because the industry and everybody is invested in us killing each other and us dying. They're making $1 million investments in that. Yeah. What responsibility do the artists who get rich have to invest in us living, right? What are you willing to give? Because we know, okay, that's entertainment. We're saying this is entertainment. This is what we talking about. We ain't living that. So now in real life, like the actors do, right? The actors play Commando. They do this. Robert De Niro does this, and he goes back to his community and he invests in that community. He invests in making sure that the people around him are better. So I want to see artists, right, I want to see artists. When I put this Boycott Black Murder thing together, it was saying to myself, I want to see artists, athletes, everybody prominent, regular community activists, brothers from the community who are doing the work, sit down and say, okay, what do we need to invest in our communities to make sure the realities that we talk about in this music, they don't have to experience that no more,
now,
right?
Let me ask you, Mysonne, what do you say to somebody that say that now you're the old man? And the reason I say that is, the first time people say is, oh, they could get security. And I know, coming up, a lot of artists faked it, right? You look like you had everything. You got the nice car, but you ain't really have it.
Right.
You showed out because it made you look good. It got you into that club. It got your song played. It got this, that, and the other. They ain't really have it. And a lot of times, a lot of people, they run with 50 people because they can't afford security. Those 50 people is free. They're going to ride regardless. So what do you say to those people? Because a lot of these artists are doing that. They can't afford.
If you can't afford to protect it, you can't afford to wear it.
And that's what I'm saying. And that's the reality of the situation.
Like you wore it.
Exactly. But the thing is, I wasn't like that, and I wore it. But I wasn't wise. I didn't have a lot of people around me that told me different things. And the one person who did, me and him would go back and forth and argue about, and he'd be like, yo, you can't do this, you can't do this. And
Mike, you also was built different. I mean,
I was.
I don't want to talk about Mike to be security.
I mean, I didn't want to, that wasn't really what I wanted to say.
I'm talking about on the come up. When you was coming up.
But I still was. I was
just
just a different breed of individual. I would be by myself. I never needed 50 people. You understand what I'm saying? I was willing to deal with whatever consequences, but even that didn't make much sense, right? Because I was always on edge, and it created more situations. But I'm just saying, at this point, the culture of hip hop is so much bigger. It's not just the music; it's sports, it's everything, right? And we have to invest in our lives the same way that every other community does.
Right.
That's right.
So, and that's what Boycott Black Murder is. Okay, we make the music, we saying that drill music and none of that is what's responsible for the violence. Then we have to, I want to see these artists, all the drill artists, all of the top artists say, okay, I'm going back to the communities, I'm gonna invest this, right? We're gonna put this amount of money in a fund. What do our communities need? These communities who are feeding you, making you millionaires, making you rich, what are you willing to invest to make sure the kids don't gotta go through the same thing that you gotta do? There are circumstances, trauma that's going in those communities. What are you willing to invest? Are you gonna do some concerts? Let's do some concerts in the community so that we can take that money and we can give it back in those communities, build these centers that they have, be able to employ the mental health, whatever is going on, because every other culture and everything is invested in it. We are not investing in that, and that's what my problem is. I'm not mad at drill music. Nah, I came up on
street music.
I came up on locks. I came up with MOP. Like, it wasn't nobody harder than MOP. It wasn't nobody harder than Fredro and them. Like, so I understand that that's a reality. But now we understand that people are dying every day, and these kids are dying at 13. This is their only way out. This is what they only see this way out. So if we're not giving them something else, then they're going to keep killing each other. And we just killing ourselves.
I'm glad you said that, though, because we often have revisionist history as older people and act like we didn't grow up on the worst shit known to fucking man.
Absolutely.
But was it at this propensity? Like, I was thinking about...
I don't know.
I don't know. I can't say... Yo, listen to me.
Bro.
When you walked into a club where MOP was on...
Annie up.
But how many MOPs were there? There wasn't 20 MOPs.
They were snatching the chain.
We were get shot with a chopper.
You did get shot.
That's what I'm trying to
Back then,
say.
throw your guns in the air and all of that shit like that.
But nobody
that
was
was
getting
one
shot.
honest.
You wasn't getting shot.
I don't know about that.
Not like this.
I don't think it was
wasn't.
at the propensity that we see now.
It wasn't.
That's my issue.
Because the
with
access
it.
wasn't the same.
But we're acting like they haven't been doing Stop the Violence records, self-destruction records.
But we need
since
one of
the
those.
beginning of
That's
time.
another
When the
thing.
last
We
time
need
we
to
heard
stop
one
the
of
violence.
those?
We need to self. I'm reaching out to all artists. We need a self-destruction. We need one of those right now, and we need it from prominent people. We need young dudes.
Yes.
I need Dirk on the song talking about, I've been through this, but I realized we can't be killing each other right now. I need Chief Keef to get, like, I need those, because that's where these people think that they following them. And not saying that they're responsible for it, but they think these young kids want to be y'all. And not knowing that your reality is different. You live in mansions now, you away from violence, you ain't outside beefing. That's what you had to go through to get to. So now invest to make sure that these kids don't have to go through the same things you had to.
And even evolution, right? Like, certain people, you'll eat a certain thing, and then at some point, history will say, hey, you can't keep eating that because you'll die. You don't say, eat more of that. So even in the context of music, I think at some point, and you see it happen with artists, after they make it, they say, I don't want to make music like this no more. because it's dangerous and it's going to cause these issues, but
that's
no one
wisdom.
allows that to get visibility. So there is something that is also impeding the process of evolution that would naturally happen, where I think you would get less and less music like this. So as a result, you get more and more music like this. And then the
Because
other
it's
thing starts to happen where the
incentivized.
community is impacted. And we're not just talking about violence, because I think in every facet of life, violence happens. And that's a reality. But we're talking about hyper-violence with hyper-equipment to cause violence. So we're talking about violence happening at a propensity that we have not seen before.
I don't know, man. That
think
80s crack era was something
was-
serious, bro.
No, as far as statistically, you're correct, Charlamagne, right? There's way more people that got shot and killed in the 80s
Yeah.
and the 90s than they are today. We are, statistically speaking, we're much safer now than we were back then.
Maybe
but
we see it more because of social media.
Because of the
Yeah.
social media. Now, we didn't have that back then. So when you put more of the social media on it, it just magnifies it. So that's back to his point. This is a different level
And the question
of
is,
violence.
even
It's
like,
not
who's the
right,
safer? Because
exactly.
it's like, if people are still dying, and we say it sometimes in the community, one death is too much.
Right.
And we're not just seeing one death. Even when we were talking about Labor Day weekend in Philadelphia, in Chicago, where you talking about mass shootings. This wasn't necessarily something that you saw before, where 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 people are shot at one time.
Yeah, but it's
we're dealing with a different kind of, I think, a kind of hyper violence that we haven't necessarily dealt with before. That's my
Now, but even then, even in early on, like you would see different things. But now I'm seeing like innocent people being killed.
As
Yes, sir.
Old
Children.
grandmothers and grandfathers.
It's crazy.
It was at one time, and I know robbery and violence is no respect, but it was more of a respect. You don't mess with kids.
There was
you don't
a
mess
code.
with older people. Now it
Exactly.
just seemed like
No,
anybody can
all
get
that's
it.
out the window
You
now.
robbing people with one leg. On
Anybody
crutches,
can get it now. Unfortunately, is the mantra amongst the perpetrators, right? There's no morals and no codes anymore. Whereas we did have
It's
that.
coward culture.
It
That's
was
what
a
I
coward
call it.
culture. It was that. That's what seems to be the hype. This is why again we need to all collaborate. We need to all bond because there's a number of us that be knowing how, and these young people, most of which, I say that I don't even like to blame generations, but they're misguided missiles, right? They really are. They don't know until at the end of the day. The work that we do, with the crisis management system, the work that we do in the Cure Violence Global Movement around this country, we see these young people every day, and we work to meet them where they are, and to hopefully be able to convince them that what they're going, the pathway that they're on, it's not going to end well. But as we all know, somebody's going to throw a brick, right? And then they're going to find themselves in a situation where they're realizing from the back end that it wasn't worth it. And so we're trying to do that
And the
work.
deep thing about it is, now when we talk about violence, we talk about it in the context of it being a public health issue.
Yes.
Like violence is a disease, the way it spreads, right? So even when we think about something like the coronavirus, people could have easily said, well, there's been the flu before, and some people did. They said, we've had these issues before, it's not that big a deal. And then thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of people perish because of that mentality. And then at some point, the people who are responsible and who are in leadership have to say, we have to devise a real strategy to respond to this because we have to save lives. And we're the folks who are saying we don't want people to die.
That's a
and
fact.
I think we're in the same situation. Sure, maybe violence has happened at a higher propensity before, but we're still in a situation where an epidemic exists.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, we don't have an epidemic response.
That's right.
We don't get
That's
the
real.
resources.
That's right.
We don't have a real response system. And in fact, people are saying, let more of this flourish. So that's my challenge with it.
In certain neighborhoods or in certain communities,
Precisely.
right? Like mass shootings do require mass resources.
Right.
So when we see mass shootings in other communities, we see all of the people that are attached to that community come out, as been mentioned. But in our
Explain
communities,
to you was telling me about what happened with Park.
like the Parkland shooting, and the list goes on and on. You go back to Columbine, you can go up to Newtown, you can look at the Vegas when it shot when they at the concert, the Nevada joint. Those neighborhoods and communities came out. I mean, literally in Newtown, the community of Newtown, Connecticut, said that they were not sending their kids back into that school. So what they did as a city is they tore down, they demoed the school and built a whole new school for their kids because they're adamant. My kids are not going to be re-traumatized. The difference is, and this is why I go back to your point about where hip hop, I think, is our secret sauce. When these things are happening every single day in our communities, our artists, our personalities, our superstars, our leaders don't come out in that same manner. We don't organize a benefit concert yet. We don't have it so that we have the ability to raise millions of dollars to go towards it.
How much did the people raised in the school, the Parkland shooting?
Oh, man, they've been now since day one. They've been raising hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, quiet money. This is what they do, and I respect it. Yeah. But what I'm saying at the same time, when you do that research, that we could do something similar if we band together.
And what's fascinating is it's communities who don't experience the same propensity of violence who are able to get even more resources than us.
That's crazy.
Who are experiencing violence at higher rates, and we don't even get the base level of what they get. And it doesn't make sense at some point.
You're right, but then it's because the judicial system is big business. From the prisons and everything else.
It does.
Yes.
So it's just like they said, you ain't meant to survive because it's a setup. Mm-hmm. So you're set up to not only die, but to fuel an economy that thrives off you dying. Yes. And at that point, you got to realize we have to do something different, which is what we say all the time. And this is part of what we're saying because it can become normalized. Mm-hmm. It can feel like this is something that always happens. It's not a big deal.
That's exactly where we are now. That's exactly where we are. When I looked at P&B Rock, right, and I was looking at some of the comments, and I was just seeing, and I'm like, wow, this is looking like deja vu. And most people are like, yo, well, that's what happens. That's what happens. And it's like, and I was having a conversation with Meek, and he was really in a dark place. And he was just like, yo, this is not okay. This is one of my brothers from my hood. Like, this is not okay. And I was talking to him and communicating with him, and I understand that this is very dangerous. In this moment, what happened to him, it's different codes, it's things involved, Pop Smoke, like these things, these are dangerous, and we have to, and that's why I want to call for a hip hop summit, because we need leaders, we need hip hop artists, we need people to come together and say, look, we are united, right? We not promoting anything. We know that bad things happen, but we want everybody to know that this is a community, and we're gonna protect each other, and we want to make sure that people feel safe, that we're looking out for each other, if nothing else. You know what I'm saying? So I just wonder.
I agree with everything y'all saying. I just wonder that, being that we know systemically all of these socioeconomic conditions were created to have these brothers even go to a life of crime, are we able? We can't recreate that.
No, we could create a system. You got to create, like Angelo says this all the time. We have to have a system to combat a system.
That's what I'm saying. Right? We can create a system, but it's not going to be like the government.
No, it's not going to be the government. It's going to be. It has to be grassroots. It has to, like everything we've done. Like the fact that we create culture, right? The fact that somebody can wear dreads today and everybody's wearing dreads. Somebody wears a beard today. Somebody's doing this and that. That means that we have the power to change the culture. We influence behavior. So it has to be those people who are influencers, not to say, yo, this is not my fight. I can't be involved in that. I'm doing this. No, they know that's what you want to say. They know that you're more invested in protecting your personal assets, right? So once we say to ourselves that it's not about me, it's about the greater good of all of us. Let me utilize. Now, I'm not going to use everything, okay? We have Harry Belafonte, who funded the movement, say, okay, I'm going to make sure Martin Luther King is able to do this. I know you're doing this, so let me make sure that you're able to do this freely without being shut down and this and that, because when I get on Instagram, they're going to shadow ban me because I talk about certain things. When I talk about the propensity and violence in our communities and talking about stopping boycott black murder, it gets 2 or 3 views. I can't go live for 6 months. Like, these are things that's happening. So if we're not creating our own platforms, if we're not empowering our own leaders and our own voices in our community, then we left to get whatever they give us. So we have to say, yo, I see these people doing this, and I know that's what needs to be done. Let me, even if I got to quietly fund this, let me quietly fund that. If I got to build something and be a donor in something, let me do something that contributes to making sure that we're safe.
So what Mice is, I'm sorry, brother, but what Mice is speaking to is like practice today. Like when you look at the armed forces, right? You have the Marines, you have the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and they don't play the necessarily the same position, but they're the armed forces. So everybody's job is not to be on the front line, right? And so we don't expect for just any average person to say, I'm gonna hit the streets tomorrow, I'm gonna interrupt violence. That's not your lane. But bring us, those of us that are the Marines, that are willful to go out there without a vest, without a gun, make sure that we got the aid that we need. We shouldn't have to be reliant upon government and other people to be able to keep the work going on the streets. When we are hip hop, we come from that. This is our culture. And so with that type of support, that may be your contribution to the work that's going on the ground, and it would be well received.
And what AT is saying, which is deep, that analogy, and we talk about it all the time, is that you have to also realize you're at war.
Right.
At some point,
That's
you
right.
have to realize that you're under attack
right.
and you're experiencing something that others don't experience. Because if someone's fighting a war against you and you don't think you're at war,
Then you
you
lose
just
it.
dying in silence. And we're saying that at some point, and this is the point for us, we've been doing this for years, but we're saying it must be the point for the rest of us to say we're at war and we have to respond accordingly. The artists are so important because what people know is that art imitates life and life imitates art. So they know art impacts lifestyle. So they know art impacts lifestyle. So they say if we can get artists to do X, Y, and Z, this is going to impact lifestyle because they know lifestyle is culture. And that's really what's happening. And I've had the opportunity to talk with brothers who have spent long times and even created gangs. And what some of them over years say is that the lifestyle that they're living is not really a lifestyle. It's a death style. And at some point you have to come to that realization. And then you say, if I want to stay alive, I have to have a lifestyle. It can't be a death style because this is going to take us down this direction.
So let's talk about the problems. I was going to say, so what are the solutions?
Yeah, that's why I want to talk about Man Up and Boycott Black Murder. But what exactly is Man Up?
Oh man Up is like you said, brother. It is one of those solutions. It's a community-based nonprofit, street organization that I founded now 18 years ago. After the unfortunate shooting of an 8-year-old named Deshaun Hill in East New York, Brooklyn. Already being on the front line, I felt that when that little boy got shot and killed, I wasn't doing enough. And so I had to do more. I literally just started by babysitting his older brother and sister, his little brother and sister that was actually with him when he died. And so I just created an after-school program, spent into a summer camp, spent into an athletic tournament, spent into what we have now, 18 years later, a multi-million-dollar nonprofit that's putting multi-millions of dollars back into the community by hiring people from the neighborhood, people who have been there and done that, people that got backgrounds, but they now, they're using that influence that they once had for the greater good. And so that's one of the solutions. We are part of the, crisis management system. Y'all had a lot of my colleagues up here, before Erica Ford, Tamika Mount, Unto the Freedom. We had a list of other organizations citywide that we formed here in New York City, and we go across country and we help other people do the same work in their neighborhood. So that's part of the solution. But the support for these type of organization is shy. Unfortunately, we're vulnerable because we get our money from the government. Again, if we had our superstars, like what we've seen happen in Florida and in Connecticut and other people, they've actually come out to support the work that's going on the ground, then we can feel a lot more confident in the work and the efforts that we're doing.
And tell them about the czar position.
So, I'm the first czar that was ever appointed in government here in New York City. I've worked under 4 different mayors in the past, and this particular mayor, Eric Adams, he did something historic, right? He said he wanted to be different. So he sought out, a person here that he knows that comes from the ground, that works in the community, that's in the trenches, and he says, I want to give you an appointed position. I want to bring you into my administration, place you alongside my other high-level government officials, and I want you to lead this city in this particular charge. And so I became the gun violence prevention czar, in June of this year. And it's been amazing. I didn't even know that much more about my own city now that I've traveled now throughout the rest. I'm up in the Bronx and Queens, Staten Island, Brooklyn, all over. And, we're thinking about the solutions. We have $100+ billion budget. We figured that we have the resources, but they're caught up in the agencies, and we need to, loosen up the pipeline so that we make sure that the people who are on the ground actually getting some of those resources. But again, we cannot rely solely on that.
And I just want to say, part of the reason the czar position is so important is because oftentimes, even if you look at New York City, where there are a lot of organizations that are doing crisis management, addressing violence, they're often working in silos. And they're not working together in a network always. So creating the czar position allows you to centralize those things and connect people together. So the same thing is true in Newark with Keisha Yori, who's running the Office of Violent Prevention, which just happened maybe a year ago. So this work has been happening across the country, but it's often happened in small pockets. So to create a position like the czar for AT, now you have someone in leadership who is coordinating these efforts more.
From the ground. The difference is, in addition to my brother, is that people like myself, normally we weren't placed in government, right? Because we were on the menu. Now we're at the table. And we are literally sharing the table. So that's the difference. And so I appreciate the opportunity to represent the city in that regard. And I believe that when we all come together, my job is, as the brother said, is to centralize everything, to bring everybody together. I appreciate, this opportunity because, again, our work has been, kind of swept under the rug. And, people have been dying and they got this mindset that that's what's supposed to happen. And their neighbors, you're supposed to kill each other. But that's not so. Even if one person still continues to die, that's one death too many.
That's why I love what Mike started with the boycott Black murder movement, man. Break that down for us, man.
Well, it's pretty much just an extension of what AT does, right? Is that me having an influence in the hip-hop culture and also in the streets and also being on the front line of this movement and just understanding that violence is so many different directions. It comes from, we boycott against police violence, we boycott against community violence. It's so many different ways. And it all boils down to black violence because blacks are the leading people who are dying from gun violence every day in this community. So we have to have the same energy for both, right? The same way we're going out there marching and we saying we need to have accountability, we need to have accountability in our own communities. So what I wanted to do was utilize, because there are so many different leaders across this nation, AT and like he said, Keisha Yuri and also there are brothers out in Vegas as we're working with right now. So we want to connect with all of the like minds. Pastor McBride,
yes.
Chico.
Yes.
All of these brothers, there are brothers who have, a lot of them are formerly incarcerated, some aren't, who understand what it is needed in this time, right? And I want us to come together and create this whole initiative and go to communities and empower the people in those communities who have the voices, who have the ears of the communities and say, okay, what do you need in these communities, right? And then we do what we can to bring those resources to make sure that the murders and the violence is stopped because we understand that poverty is violence. It's not violence does not happen where well-to-do people are. It doesn't happen everywhere.
And you don't need as much police. They don't need as much money.
I've been all around this world, and I realized that the safest places do not have police in them. That's right. There are no police on the corner, so that's a myth. So what happens is the safest communities are communities who don't have poverty.
They have resources.
They have the resources. So what we want to do at Boycott Black Murder is utilize every voice, every community leader, every violence interrupt and come together and say, okay, we're going to your community. We want to utilize, we like the Wu-Tang Clan of gun violence, right? And everybody has their own voice, everybody has their own say, but it's not working in silos. It's us coming together. We want to come to your community and we want to show up. And we want to bring your favorite artist to your community and we want him to sit with us and we want him to tell you what we don't tell you. So we want to collaborate with artists and with influencers and all of those and come together and create this movement that's going to take a lot of these guns and take the violence out of the street.
So if you even look like at brothers like PNB, that was one of our own. That brother was who literally would come to the community.
That's right.
Would be on the streets, out there at the schools. And that's something, that's why this particular death is real personal to us because it's like, now you're taking out the good rappers, you're taking out the good artists, those that are involved in community, and that's really something that's really hit us hard when we heard of the brother's passing. And so we hope that we don't want to see another PNB. We want to make sure.
Shit, I didn't want to see another Nipsey.
Absolutely, right.
I didn't want to see another Dolph.
But it's a disease, Charlamagne, and nobody's exempt or immune to it.
Right.
So this brother was sitting down just having some lunch with his family, And so if we don't want to see another, then that's where again we all got to come together so we can prevent it. We can't guarantee, but we can at least feel good that we've made every strong effort in the process.
And I agree with all of that. I still think though, it still has to be some type of self-preservation.
No, I agree.
You know what I mean? Like when you're worth something, you got to move like you're worth it.
That's
like
right.
You can't just be.
But you got to feel like you're worth something.
Yes,
and I say it to people all the time. We often confuse cost, worth, and value.
Break that down.
For young folks, it's hard to feel like you're worth something if you have no value. And there's no value in your community, and your community doesn't have resources, which is why most young people, and I felt the same way, you don't think you're going to live past 21. And you might not be in the Army, but why do you feel that way? Why does your community produce that kind of trauma in young black boys and young black girls? It's because there's no value in their communities. And precisely what we have to do is not only infuse those resources, but when Mice talks about building a movement, we're talking about building that system that transforms that very thing, where young people say, I do have value, and I do have a reason to live, and I shouldn't pick up a gun. And I should also tell this other brother, don't pick up a gun, and don't use that gun, because I value you and I value you. And Malcolm said it way back when. He's like, who taught you to hate yourself?
That's right. That's right.
That's the question we have to ask ourselves, because you don't kill somebody you love or someone you care about or someone. That's right.
Because I love my
you
brother.
and you kill someone because you don't think they're your brother.
And that's what I say. And we have to identify each other as brothers again, right? We took the neighbor out of neighborhood and we just said the hood. So we don't even see ourselves as connected no more. So we got to put the neighbor back in hood. We got to identify each other as brothers. I'm dropping a song today called Boycott Black Murder, and the video drops. It's very powerful. I want y'all to see the video. Hopefully you'll play the song, Envy, quote unquote, hopefully. But
You can't play positive music on the radio.
You can't do it.
Listen, we're going to try
That's
today.
why we're in the situation we're in now.
That's why we're in the situation. But really, man, I really want us to understand that the dynamics of our community is very serious, right? We are at war against the system, and then we're at war with each other, right? The minister said, I don't even know who the enemy is right now. You make it very hard for me.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
right,
When we going against each other. So we have to re-identify each other and see each other as brothers again and connect with each other. Because when you see somebody as your brother, you don't want to take his life.
Right.
You want to do everything you can to protect and make sure that person is safe. So let's put the neighbor back in neighborhood. Let's start community, build community, unity and community again. We are so separated. Like, people got beef with the next door neighbor.
Yeah.
You can't even come out
crazy.
your house. They at war. You're the op, my next door. Yo, we got. And I'm like, what? He lived next
That's out of
door.
control.
My next door neighbor our doors was open. They used to just walk in. Yo, can I get a cup of sugar? Yo,
Yes.
y'all got milk in the refrigerator? Go get it. Like, we lived in the community.
Yeah.
That's not happening no more, because the culture has told us that that's the wrong thing. And you got to think about this. Just really think about this. You can't value your life when you're willing to kill somebody and take a chain that you're throwing your life away.
Yeah.
Listen to what I'm saying. 90% of the people who kill somebody or rob somebody in our community is going to do 20, 15, 20 years. And they made a conscious decision that chain, that 1 second or whatever, is worth that. How much do you actually value your life? Right. Like that. I want to know, how did we get so poisoned that we put the value in that more than our freedom and our lives?
And they're tricking you out of your life.
And I want to just, again, I want to reinforce and I want to give a shout out to my brothers and sisters at Man Up Incorporated.
Yeah.
Because if you came out to where we are, and we're in East New York, we're in the 7-5, which is one of the, if not right now, top of the city, unfortunately. But in pockets where we exist, we call each other brother. We call each other sister.
Correct.
From as young as 5-year-old babies, they come into our programs, they adopt that mindset. When they leave out, they see each other's family, because that's what it's about. We literally are, and I'm going to put that out there, we are biologically related. Every single one of us, even in this room. There's one race. There is a human race. And we have to stop thinking that we are separate. And like when you go to the funeral, you go to the family reunion, you bump into people that you realize that you are related to.
That's right.
Not knowing that we really all come from the same, sort of, and that's what we're doing. And we have to continue to do that. We have to raise that bar so that we build that community back
And
up.
that's how you create transformation. Because when you look at the Cure Violence model and what's so successful is they recognize areas or precincts, a floor block radius that they say there's high rates of violence. And they say, we're going to show up here, create supports, and we're going to reduce the violence. And that's in fact what happens.
That's exactly
You
what's
create a
happening.
culture in a small block radius that reduces gun violence, and it works.
By changing
But
the mindset.
we don't get the resources to do it in the places that it needs to happen. This isn't a formula that we're making up. This is a formula that's
It's
worked
proven.
for decades.
We're talking
and we're
about-
saying we just
yes,
want
sir.
more resources to continue to do it and end violence in our communities, to keep people alive, to show them they're valued, to put the neighbor back in neighborhood, and to create transformation that makes other people feel safe too. Because if this 4-block radius doesn't feel safe and there's violence, it's going to spill into your 4-block radius. So do the right thing here so that everyone can feel safe.
Yeah, what
let's
Elijah
introduce
Muhammad
the
used to
song.
say. Elijah Muhammad used to say a neighborhood can change a city can change a state can change a nation can change the world.
Nation building.
Nation building, man.
Well, let's introduce the song. So that
The
way I
song,
want
there you go. It's getting played today. Today is called. This song is called "Boycott Black Murder." It is a testament of what's going on in communities. The video will be dropping today too. It's a very powerful video, so I hope that it has the impact that I want it to have, man. And first, go to boycottblackmurder.com.
That's correct.
Take the pledge. We need everybody to take the pledge, man, and say, I can't kill my brother because I love my brother.
And how do we donate to Man Up?
Man, they can go to our website. It's manupinc.org. That's manupinc.org. They can go to my website, at-mitchell.com as well. And, you know, all donations are tax deductible. We got the same status that Red Cross, Salvation Army, all the other charities have. We have the same charity status.
But I don't want donations. We want investments, man.
That's a fact. How about that?
In us living, man.
All right. Well, it's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.